Mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, the Supreme's power is infinite. It is our faith that is small. The offering of our being we make to the Divine must be integral and effective. With my love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo, taken from the Letters on Yoga Part 2. Topic: The First Responses of the Divine, page 175. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, what you describe as the response of the Divine in the language of yogic experience as a feeling of a greater peace, light, ease, trust, difficulties, lessening, certitude could rather be called a response of your own nature to the Divine. There is a peace or a light which is the response of the Divine, but that is a wide peace, a great light which is felt as a presence other than one's personal self, not part of one's personal nature, but something that comes from above, though in the end it possesses the nature, or there is the presence itself which carries with it indeed the absolute liberation, happiness, certitude. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, but the first responses of the Divine are often not like that. They come rather as a touch, a pressure one must be in a condition to recognize and to accept. Or it is a voice of assurance, sometimes a very still, small voice, a momentary image or presence, a whisper of guidance. Sometimes there are many forms it may take. Then it withdraws, and the preparation of the nature goes on till it is possible for the touch to come again and again, to last longer, to change into something more pressing and near and intimate. The Divine in the beginning, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo, the Divine in the beginning does not impose himself. He asks for recognition, for acceptance. That is one reason why the mind must fall silent, not put tests, not make claims. There must be no room for the true intuition which recognizes at once the true touch and accepts it, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Next topic, the Divine Guidance. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the question you have put raises one of the most difficult and complicated of all the problems, and to deal with it all adequately would need an answer as long as the longest chapter of the life divine. I can only state my own knowledge founded not on reasoning but on experience that there is such a guidance and that nothing is in vain in this universe. If we look only at outward facts in their surface appearance, if we look only at the outward facts in their surface appearance, or if we regard what we see happening around us as definitive, not as processes of a moment in a developing whole, the guidance is not apparent. At most, we may see interventions occasional or sometimes frequent. The guidance can become evident only if we go behind appearance. The guidance can become evident only if we go behind appearances and begin to understand the forces at work and the way of their working and their secret significance. After all, real knowledge, even scientific knowledge, comes by going behind the surface phenomenon to their hidden process and causes. It is quite obvious that this world is full of suffering and afflicted with transience to a degree that seems to justify the Gita's description of it as this unhappy and transient world. Anityam Asukham. The question is, says our Lord, the question is whether it is a mere creation of chance or governed by a mechanic, inconscient law, or whether there is a meaning in it and something beyond its present appearance towards which we move. If there is a meaning, if there is something towards which things are evolving, then inevitably there must be a guidance. And that means a supporting consciousness and will is there with which we can come into the inner contact. If there is such a consciousness and will, it is not likely that it would stultify itself by annulling the world's meaning or turning it into a perpetual or eventual failure. Our Lord Aurobindo says the world has a double aspect. It seems to be based on material inconscience and an ignorant mind and life full of that inconscience, error and sorrow, death and suffering are the necessary consequences. But there is evidently too a partially successful endeavor and an imperfect growth towards light, knowledge, truth, good, happiness, harmony and beauty, at least a partial flowering of these things. The meaning of this world must evidently lie in this opposition. It must be an evolution which is leading or struggling towards higher things out of a first darker appearance. Whatever guidance there is must be given under these conditions of struggle and must be leading towards that higher state of things. It is leading the individual, certainly, and the world, presumably, towards the higher state, but through the double terms of knowledge, ignorance, light, darkness, death and life, pain and pleasure, happiness and suffering. None of the terms can be excluded until the higher status is reached and established. It is not and cannot be ordinarily a guidance which at once rejects the darker terms, or still less a guidance which brings solely and nothing but happiness, success and good fortune. Its main concern is with the growth of our being and consciousness, the growth towards a higher self, towards the divine, eventually towards a higher light, truth and bliss. The rest is secondary, sometimes a means, sometimes a result, not a primary purpose. Our Lord Aurobindo says, the true sense of guidance becomes clearer when we can go deep within and see from there more intimately the play of the forces and receive intimations of the will behind them. The surface mind can only get an imperfect glimpse. When we are in contact with the divine or in contact with an inner knowledge and vision, we begin to see all the circumstances of our life in a new light and can observe how they all tended without our knowing it towards the growth of our being and consciousness, towards the work we had to do, towards some development that had to be made, not only what seemed good, fortunate, or successful, but the struggles, failures, difficulties, upheavals. But with each person, the guidance works differently according to his nature, the conditions of his life, his caste of consciousness, his stage of development, his need of further experience. We are not automata, but conscious beings, and our mentality, our will and its decisions, our attitude to life and demand on it, our motives and movements help to determine our course, and they may lead to much suffering and evil, but through it all, the guidance makes use of them for our growth in experience and consequently in the development of our being and consciousness. All advance by however devious ways, even in spite of what seems a good going backwards or going astray, gathering whatever experience is necessary for the soul's destiny. When we are in close contact with the divine, a protection can come in which helps or directly guides or moves us. It does not throw aside all difficulties, sufferings, or dangers, but it carries us through them and out of them, except whether for a special purpose there is a need of the opposite. Let me repeat this. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, when we are in close contact with the divine, a protection can come in which helps or directly guides or moves us. It does not throw aside all our difficulties, sufferings, or dangers, but it carries us through them and out of them, except whether for a special purpose there is a need of the opposite. It is the same thing on a larger scale, in a more complex way with the guidance of the world movement. That seems to move according to the conditions and laws and forces of the moment through constant vicissitudes, but still there is something in it that drives to the evolutionary purpose, although it is more difficult to see, understand and follow than in smaller, more intimate field of individual consciousness and life. What happens in a particular juncture of the world action or life of humanity, however catastrophical, is not ultimately determinative. Here too, one has to see not the outward play of forces in a particular case or a particular time, but also the inner and secret play, the far-off outcome, the event that lies behind, and the will at work behind it all. Falsehood and darkness are strong everywhere on the earth and have always been so, and at times they seem to dominate. But there have also been not only the gleams but outbursts of the light. In the mass of things and the long course of time, whatever may be the appearances of this or that epoch or moment, the growth of light, of the divine light, is there, and the struggle towards better things does not cease. At the present time, falsehood and darkness have gathered their forces and are extremely powerful. But even if we reject the assertion of the mystics and prophets since early times that such a condition of things must proceed, the manifestation, and is even a sign of its approach. Yet, it does not necessarily indicate the victory, even temporary, of the falsehood. It merely means that the struggle between the forces is at its acme. The result may very well be the stronger emergence of the best that can be. For the world movement often works in that way. I leave it at that and say nothing more. Next topic, allow the divine force to work. Our Lord Aurobindo says in page 188, it is quite true that left to yourself you can do nothing. That is why you have to be in contact with the divine force, which is there to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. The only thing you have to do is to allow the force to act. Put yourself on its side, which means to have faith in it, to rely upon it, not to trouble and harass yourself, to remember it quietly, to call upon it quietly, to let it act quietly. If you do all that, all else will be done for you. Not at all at once, because there is much to clear away, but still it will be done steadily and more and more. Passivity can be only to the divine force when it is felt at work. There can be no passivity to other forces, for that would be dangerous in the extreme. Passivity does not mean a blank mind. It means allowing the divine force to work without interference of the mental preferences, vital desires, or the physical disinclinations. As for the freedom from ego or desire, that is the general law of all yoga. But it cannot be acquired by merely giving up work. The majority of sannyasin are not at all free from desire or ego. Always keep in touch with the divine force. The best thing for you to do is that simply allow it to do its own work, whether necessarily it will take hold of the inferior energies and purify them. At other times it will empty you of them and fill you with itself. But if you let your mind take the lead and discuss and decide what is to be done, you will lose touch with the divine force, and the lower energies will begin to act for themselves, and all go into confusion and a wrong moment. Oh, one feels the force only when one is conscious, in conscious contact with it. It is a great progress, a decisive advance if, at the time the force is acting behind the screen, you feel that it is there, that the help and support, the more enlightened consciousness is still there. This is the second stage in the sadhana. There is a third one when there is no screen and the force and all else are always felt, whether actively working or pausing during a transition. Remind yourself, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo, remind yourself always that the divine force is there, that you have felt it, and that even if you seem to lose consciousness of it for a time, or it seems something distant, still it is there and is sure to prevail. For those for whom the force has touched and taken up belong henceforth to the divine.